I'm Mick Badron, and what we're going to do today is integrate an on-premise SQL system to CRM, dynamic CRM, and build a mobile app in about an hour or so. So pretty remarkable. I sort of took on this. I came up with the content for this session. I thought, you know, this year at Ignite, I'm going to do something that doesn't involve me cutting 2,000 lines of code and is going to be a little bit easier, I thought. So to get it to here was a great event, and I'll explain to you, what I found along the way. So welcome. So just to give you a little bit of an idea as to who I am and how I fit into the picture. So I'm a CTO at MOQ Digital at the moment, and also part of the Azure MVP Insider and Advisor group. So all in all, I've been doing integration for over about 17 years or so. Low-level systems right up through to mobility and high-end near real-time interfaces being pushed down to various platforms. Integration hasn't changed. The need for integration hasn't changed over the years. How we do integration has. And it's great to see, a lot of the messaging circling back, from Microsoft in particular, around integration and treating integration as a first-class citizen again, because, that's where it's all at. So when I'm not doing that, basically the other parts that make me tick in terms of my family, this is my other half. She keeps me sane and centered, the voice of reason, and is always right at home. And then I have the naughty two that, grandma gets away. They get away with everything from grandma. Never was like that when I was a kid. This forms the trio of my tech support at home. And basically, the only person that listens to me is my dog, Honey. So welcome aboard. I love to do ocean swims and things like that, get out in the water and a bit of meditation time. So what are we going to do today? We're going to have a look at the why. So it's great to go in and go head on into technology. At some point, someone's going to ask you, what's the business value in this? How can we use it? I love technology, being a developer for years and years and years. And, someone inevitably comes up to you and says, so how's this useful? And you think, it will be one day, hold on for a tick. So I want to sort of paint the context of the why for you. Who's a developer in the room? Most of us, great. In terms of those that aren't, who's, I suppose, a manager or runs a team or that side of it? Great. All right, so the first part of what we want to look at is essentially, how do we integrate? So my database that we have is running on my laptop over here, so you can deem that as on premises. It may be part of an existing system, which is what I'm going to sort of paint the story as. Some partners that look after some managed services for us, and we get some work orders in from them via the telephone, and they put it into a database as best they could, and that's going to kickstart our process going forward. And then we want some field engineers to run around with mobile devices interacting into our solution. That's kind of the nuts and bolts of it. And that's going to be carried out by Power Apps, something called Power Apps. So there's been a lot of talk about it. Scott Guthrie gave a great demo around this space. And you think about where Microsoft is going and what they're wanting to do with this enterprise integration platform as some of the terminologies that's coming out. So why do we want to integrate? What value does it give us? And how hard is it? So, these are some of the questions I want you to have in your mind as to, what you do in your current day-to-day. So, in my world, integration is key. I'm looking after a couple of product lines, and one of the biggest value the biggest value items that I can add is, how can we build a partner ecosystem? Bless you. How can we open up the platform through APIs, API management and the like, and get on board a whole partner ecosystem? Because I look at it in the next year or 6 months or 2 years, the biggest value that we can have is having a whole bunch of partners build in on the platform. The guys who build the product are fantastic, don't get me wrong, but 6 months worth of their feature set development and so forth will yield this much. But if I can get a partner network on board, it's going to be this much. So, how can we do that in this day and age without it taking, months or years? And for those of you familiar with classical integration, we all sort of sit around the room and scratch our heads and kind of go, oh, this is how we do it. And 18 months later, something testable is ready. So we want to totally dispel that. All right, so we call it the digital transformation. And you've probably heard that term quite a lot over the last couple of years. How can companies best mobilize their assets into the digital space effectively? And this is the why, right? So, everyone's a CIO, and some key things that, conversations I have, there should be an app for this. Business users, they know what they want, right? They know if IT isn't keeping up with what they want, they'll go somewhere else. Software as a service is a great one, right? They want to spend dollars a month and say, hey, this thing does almost what we need it to do. Let's give that a go for $40 a month or whatever it is. And then if it doesn't work, or can we modify it, customize it, can we bring it in? And that's the mindset, that's the mentality that they're, picking up these things month by month and getting rid of the stuff that's not working. So how are we going to fit into that? Because, traditionally it's been you need to invest 80K or 120K, and then we're going to figure out if we can integrate it or not. So this is some of the things. And the last point there is really important. So the speed of business. So as business gets more agile, how do we get on board with that? And what tooling do we use? So the need for integration is still there, if not more so in today's age, because there's so many different software as a service offerings and various other things. Obviously Azure has amazing amount of services out there that how do we plug those in to what we do? Cognitive services, for example, is a classic one, and machine learning is very topical today. You say that and you go, oh, gee, that must be good. But, how do we integrate these things in hours rather than days, weeks, or months? And I can tell you all sorts of war stories, in those sort of time frames. So that's what we want to look at. How can we do that? And that's what Microsoft has definitely up front and centre. So, the ever-increasing speed of innovation outside of work influences the public perception of IT at work. So, you get all these fantastic shows on TV. They walk around being able to get satellite images on their phones in concrete bunkers and everything else. And, users walk into IT on a Monday morning and go, can I get my background from a blue to a red, please? And they go, no. And you're like, so, this is where we need to fall in step with what the business is requiring. So obviously we have challenges in the integration space. So line of business applications, modern APIs, everything's sort of centered towards a REST, HTTP REST-based, OAuth type model. And that's been fantastic for us so far. What about if it isn't? And what about, reality, meaning there's a whole bunch of other systems that we have that don't fit that model. Simply people aren't around to do it, or they don't care, or it's some big file drop that we have that gets processed overnight. So, also integration with SaaS, which I spoke a little bit about there. And then mobile development, just about every project in the last 2 years that I've done has a mobile component to it, device, whatever that might be. And that's users saying, hey, where is it? Can I get it off the App Store yet? And I've got some parts of the business that think, it's not a product until you can get it from the App Store, right? Which is just their perception. So you put a Hello World in the App Store and they run up and down the corridors going, this is fantastic. Look, we've got an app, right? So how do we do all of this? And that's obviously what's the premise. So what's driving these changes and changes to the way that we work? And things like applications are everywhere. As you all know, and I gather you've got a lot of experience with, it's not just locked away on the domain, on the NT domain or the Windows Active Directory domain anymore at work, and the only time you can get to it is at work. You're on the weekends, people work from home, lots of flexibility. You've got 10-minute, 15-minute here, there. Can I jump on the app and do the work that I need to do? That's the sort of thinking that we need to be thinking about as well. So data is everywhere as well. How do we combine weather reports and a whole bunch of other things in? And that opens up other areas around security, encryption at rest, those kind of questions. But we need to be able to get access to data. It shouldn't be a 2-month process to say, well, you get these two guys on either side of a contract, and they go, well, what do you need? And you go, well, what can you give us? What do you need? And backwards and forwards it goes. Don't know anything like that, right? And we want to have connectivity. Right? We need to be connected. I'm on my phone, I'm connected. I'm on a device, I'm connected. I'm here at the conference, I'm connected. It's a blessing and a curse. Right? The best holiday you have is the one that you put your phone away and you say, wasn't that a fantastic holiday? And why was that? Because you weren't connected, right? So integration is the backbone. Just some numbers, so you can take some numbers away back to people at work. Things like 70% of the cost of a mobile app project is concerned with integration. Right? And there's a reference down the bottom there in 6-point writing for you to download off the slide deck later on. That's pretty phenomenal, right? 70%. We're building a mobile app and we're spending all this time in integration. How do we get the thing talking to the bits that we need it to? So that's pretty amazing. Obviously there's an IoT play over here, and certainly the part around hybrid integration. And I'm sure you've heard lots of messages, and I've been harping on about this for years, that you don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. You can pick and choose. Pick how much cloud you want to use and how much hybrid you want to use. Where it makes sense to move it, move it. Where you want to keep it, keep it. The beauty is we can incorporate all this into our solution in today. So what are we building? So basically there's a managed services call center over here. I've got my little laser pointer. Right. So there's managed services. So it's a sort of an arm's reach type mob that we have, company, partner. And they answer phones, they do a bunch of other things, and they take in some work orders. I just went for something simple. They take in some work orders and it'll land in a SQL server on my laptop on premises. That's the best they've done. They've said, well, it's taken us 8 weeks and this is sort of an offshoot of the system that we use, and that's what you can go to and pick up. So the next thing that I wanted to do, our company, fictitious company, is head on into Dynamics, and they've got a good Dynamics 365 base and they're working on it. So what I'd like to do is dovetail that into our Dynamics. I could pick anything here, and this is the beauty of the Microsoft platform, is the enterprise integration platform, is that they do make it very easy for us to pick and choose. And if I was to write that down on a bit of paper for you, there'd be a little asterisk next to it, which meant depends, right? But depends on the connector that you use and the fun and games that you have with that particular connector for the system. But I do need to know about Dynamics. So at this point, I do need to know, whereabouts in Dynamics I'm going to put this thing, what it's going to be called. It's going to be called a work order. And then what are some properties that I need to set about that work order to make it happen, right? So I do need to know about it. I can't sort of tiptoe through the tulips on top of clouds and not pretend and care. I do need to know some details about this. So once we get it into that system, we've then got other pressures from the business and other sides of the business talking to us about all of this that say, well, how can we best mobilize that? How can we see that? How can we utilize it? What's the best value for our field engineers running around, performing the work orders and seeing and interacting? We could go and get a mobile solution built. Absolutely, it's not going to be the answer. This isn't the answer for everything, but it's a fair thing to consider. It goes a long way in our traditional mobile development space. And then, being able to invoke something like Power Apps to be able to give us that application down on our mobile platform. The other beauty about, Power Apps is that I develop it once and then I can deploy down to, the various devices and an update, if I'm making an update, I don't have to wait 5 or 6 weeks. One of the applications that we have at work is deployed out to 2,800 different variants, and each one of those need to be approved individually in app stores. So you can imagine the process behind that. So we're going to use Logic Apps and this integrated data gateway, integrated via a data gateway. So that's an agent, a local agent we install and set up running on my machine, and it's controlled via Logic Apps. Under the hood, Service Bus Relay. So we've sort of spoken a bit about the why, the how. Well, what does this integration platform look like? And I'm sure this sort of slide has been shown around the place, but we have a story for on-premises type integration with BizTalk Server, and then in the cloud, use as much or as little as you want. So the beauty about things like Logic Apps, and we're looking at pro integration around, just up at this point up here, but the beauty about Logic Apps, within a lunchtime break, you can go and evaluate something to see whether it's worth chasing. You can see an answer, mini POC or whatever you want to call it. But it's pretty phenomenal that I can get to a certain point. I don't worry about servers, where it's running, how it's running, 12-week process to get some more space provisioned in the rack, whatever that looks like, right? Or even these days, who's got control to the Azure subscription to let us spin up a sandbox to do something? I know you'd never think that's possible in the cloud era. I sit there and scratch my head, and it happens. So look, Logic Apps tied together with BizTalk Server forms the core of the Microsoft integration platform. So around the edges of that, API management, which APIs, as you've probably heard, API is a new economy, the API economy. And as we talk about this digital transformation journey that companies are going on, the true value is not so much, my opinion, the true value is not so much the website that's been produced, the mobile app that's been produced that looks beautiful in 16 million colours. I'm trying to explain to my kids that we only had 8 bits when I was little. Anyway, that's one part of it. But really, the key part of it is, well, how can we provision APIs? How can we get into the lifeblood of the company and the system? So one of our customers does large online auctions and those sorts of things. So they've spent a fortune in developing the web front end and web presence and mobile presence, when really the key behind what they want is a whole API layer, a robust API layer that they can then offer B2C and B2B and downstream suppliers and so on. So that kind of distills out of the digital transformation work that you might do with customers or with yourselves internally and so on. So how can you have a robust API setup, throttled, and that scales with you? So API management is one of those. The thing that makes Logic Apps work are the connectors, right? If you didn't have connectors, you'd be connecting to you, yourself, and I. And you'd be like, this is great. Watch, echo, ping. Watch, if I ping from over here, it'll go over there. And to the seasoned integrator, we get really excited when a file lands in a folder, right? Until you've experienced it, you haven't seen it. So, a file landed. Did it land? And it'll be up and down the hallway, right? So look, Azure is just far too busy, far too rich to ignore. Phenomenal amount of changes happening each and every day. Every 2 days, there's a major new service being released. So whatever I'm doing going forward, this has to be up front and center. I've got to be able to get access to this world, right? Because these guys, to credit to the Azure team, they bring out some phenomenal services each and every day. And if I'm building a new solution, I want to be able to get access to this. But I want to be able to do it fast. I don't want to take 4 weeks to integrate to DocDB, for example. We just don't have that luxury anymore. How can we sort of, test and learn and have that kind of stuff? So the connectors, and for the developers in the room, absolutely, you can go off and develop your own connectors in this space, right? So API connectors, we can go off and connect to different services around the place, as well as Microsoft, I've got a connector slide up here. A year ago, there was about 20 connectors. So in the space of a year, this is the cadence that they've been able to do. So it tells me a couple of things. Tells us a couple of things. One is they've got it right. So previously when we've had connector models on products and adapters and things, it took a serious amount of effort to get those in place. Whereas what we're seeing here in the Logic App space is the connector model is lightweight, lean, and you're able to get stuff out pretty quickly. You do need Visual Studio to be able to do that, right? So for those of you in developer land, you just itch to sort of get into Visual Studio and do something. This is one of the spaces where you can do it. So, and obviously being able to plug into Azure services and the like. So the key, we'd like to be able to orchestrate different processes as they come through to, whether it be Dynamics, Logic Apps is the glue that's going to tie it together. And so in this case, Logic Apps is an enterprise-ready orchestration integration engine. So it can scale with you. You can run it, one or two. You can run it at the hundreds of thousands. And that's a pretty phenomenal piece of the puzzle to include in your work. Because ultimately, being a developer, classic saying that goes across the office is, works okay on my machine. Select star from customers and you get back 5. And the guys in production are going, this is just dying. What's going on? Well, works okay on my machine. And, select star from 50 million customers in production. Oh, it must be your fault. Go and throw more hardware at it or something, right? Database needs tuning. So what we want to be able to do is not worry about that anymore. We want to be able to include pieces in the puzzle up front that will work with us the way we want to work. Because ultimately we do want, we do want our fruits of our labour to be used. We do want the solutions to scale. What's the best way that we can do that? Do we have a whole, new piece of work that works out how we scale and load balance and, scale out the application? That's going to be another significant project. Or can we use pieces of the puzzle up front that are built for that? Right. So I do sort of caveat that with, we are impacted by what kind of connector we use as well. So sometimes the system we're talking to can't handle the rate and the velocity that we're talking. So just bear that in mind. So to complete out the full story, we've got a gateway, we've got the different different systems we can connect to down there on premises, and then obviously include BizTalk to get that rounded picture. And there's a lot of synergy between Logic Apps and BizTalk, with BizTalk having a Logic Apps adapter that enables seamless communication between the two. So look, that part is great. That's sort of where we're at. Let's flick over to some facial recognition. There we go. Great. All right. So what I'll do, the first thing is, here is my database, and it's our work orders. So I've got 2 work orders in there, and basically in the description of the work order it says, well, we'll fix the dryer and the pool pump needs fixing, and so on. So this is our database. This is SQL that's running on the laptop, on premises, and we've got 2 work orders in there. So the thing that I have running and configured, it's not like one of those cooking shows where it's 10 minutes in the oven and it looks like this and you go, well, mine looks nothing like that. And I've given it 12. So look, I've got a service that runs. It's the on-premises data gateway. So this is something that's evolved. It came out of Power BI, was one of the first teams to use it to connect up the different data sources. But it's a lot more generic now. So we've got this data gateway. So I can give it various commands from Logic Apps to go down. So as long as I've got this entry point into, let's say, my on-premises environment, it could be one database, it could be another database, it could be a file system. There's a variety of different accesses that this thing gives me. Under the covers is Service Bus Relay. and there's security around that and so forth as well. So so in my Azure portal here, I've got various things added to my resource group, and I've got a logic app here that I'm working on, call it that, and definitely working on, very raw. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is trigger this. How's this thing going to run? How do we kick it off? And there's a few different ways we can kick this thing off, through timers, through messages arriving in a queue, and so on. I'm going to kick it off with an HTTP request response. And I'll tell you why I do that in just a tick. So I'm just going to hit save on this at the moment. Now, as part of my request response, I can also add some parameters in here if I need to. So this turns out, my logic here turns out to be at the end of an HTTP endpoint, at the end of a URL. So the reason why all logic apps can be kicked off through an HTTP request or a post. The difference here is, and I'll just bring this out so you can see it. The difference here is that in this shape of actually, what it does, it includes some of the keys and some of the authentication required. Whereas if I don't have this shape and I want to manually, or I want to be able to kick off a logic app through HTTP, I need to go and do an OAuth dance and get a bearer token and things like that before I kick it off. Whereas here it's embedded into the URL, so I can put this in a post somewhere and go and do it straight away. So it's just a bit convenient for me. Now, what we usually do as we're building out our flows is see what's happening. So the next step is we'll go and add an HTTP post, and one of the places where we usually go to get this information is through something like request bin. And paste would be good right there, but hello, Mr. Paste. There we go. And so what I'll do is drag and drop. Of course I won't. Drag and drop the body over, or click on it. That'd be great, thank you. And this is now ready to run. So this is a scalable. It doesn't do much apart from receive a request and go off and run. So I can kick this off running, sorry. And let's run. So you can see the execution that's happened. I can also go out to request bin just to see what's been going on. Okay, so nothing's happened yet, but everything seems to be working well. We're talking, great, fantastic. So what I'd like to do is to go back into the designer. I've also got a code view behind this. Right, so this is sort of my JSON type view. This sits on top of ARM, the Azure Resource Manager. So what the Logic Apps team did was to tandem their work, couple in their work with the Azure Resource Manager team. So the ARM or Resource Manager, basically that's responsible for provisioning all of the components that you see in Azure worldwide. So roughly it's about 2 billion requests last time I looked worldwide each day. So it knows a thing or two about taking some commands and provisioning them on the platform. And so what was missing in the Logic App space was basically the orchestration and the integration side of it. But as far as the logging, diagnostics, retriability, fault tolerance, recovery, so on and so forth, it's all there underlying the platform. Hence the reason to go and use it. So what I'm going to do now is to go and add a SQL Server shape. And what I'd like to do is execute a stored procedure. And I'll just show you what that stored procedure looks like. So all I do in this stored procedure is go and select the work order, and then at the bottom there I update the work order where processed is 0. I set that, yeah, that'd be me debugging at night. You guys knew all that. You were just waiting. Oh, Mick, there you go. Okay. So if we're going to go and poll our work orders, what stops a poll from getting the same work orders again? Oh, we did it once. We'll go and do it again. We got 5, we got 10, we got 15 back, but they're all the same. So what we need to do, and there's a few different ways you can solve this, like in integration with everything. What I did was just create a flag in a column in the table called processed. So if processed is 1, ignore it, right? Now, you look at this, Logic Apps or the data gateway will come and call this stored procedure and return back what we need. And we can limit, select top whatever if you want to do 50 at a time. So this works okay on my machine, right? Works well on my machine, says the developer. And the other side to this is that it's going to go and perform an update. Now, the beauty about the data gateway and Logic Apps is that we get this distributed transaction. So it's not going to complete this transaction until the data coming out of this stored procedure in the data gateway is read by Logic Apps and stored by Logic Apps. Okay, so what we don't want, obviously, is this thing to go, yeah, we've sent them and they're missing in the ether somewhere. So that's the stored procedure. I've got, just because of, I've got processed as null, and over here I've just got where processed as 0. So I'm not going to change that because of the fact, let me just execute that. So I can just rerun it again for demo purposes. So let's just come back over here. Now, so when I drop this shape on the execute stored procedure, so this is a connector. This is a SQL connector. If I look at the execution logs behind the scenes, I'll see that they're all wrapped through API management. So they control things like, various things like throttling and the like. And my stored procedure comes up comes up over there. And then what I'll do is go and add an action. Same again. And just let's have a look at that output. Let's go and save it. Helps if I add the body. Let's have a look. So I'm starting to get some other parameters in here, you can see, based on the shapes that I have in front of me. Okay, let's just hit run. Successfully started. All right, green ticks all along. So far, so good, folks. And let's have a look. To refresh. Okay. So, awesome. Down through here, you can see the raw body. So we got some of the data that was in the database there in green. Okay, address 1, suburb, state, so forth, in green. So that's an exciting moment if, normally in this process. So one of the things that we can do too is basically we take the output of that and we can build a JSON schema up. So just for now, we can go and build a JSON schema to give us a bit more richness in this designer experience rather than jumping to code and having to cut code and so forth. So I've actually gone and done that. And let's just, awesome. Thanks for that. Quiet hours are now, please. Turn on quiet hours. Thank you. Okay. So I'll just show you the Logic app that I have here for the moment. And so basically we execute the stored procedure and I go away and take the JSON and create a schema out of it. And basically it allows this designer surface to get more detail about what was coming out there. Shortly, we won't need that step. Shortly, the designer logic apps will derive all this for us. And I just output it. So the next thing that I do here is a for each, because in our data, we had 2 records. So we get a collection of records in there. So in the for each, basically take the result and add it in. And this is our dynamics piece, where essentially I've already created, I've added a dynamics connector, and I've already created a connection to dynamics. Okay, first time you drop these shapes on, it says, it says, well, where do you want to create a connection to? And you fill in the details, and that gets added into the resource group in your Azure subscription. Okay, which is around here. So this is where you can see the SQL connection down the bottom. You can see a couple of the others up the top, which are my Dynamics connectors and Salesforce and so forth. So that's where those credentials get saved. And here's the big question, right? So you sit there and you go, Mick, where in the world did you get those GUIDs from and all the rest of it? So yes, it was a little bit of demo magic at this point. I could go and do lookups to Dynamics and say, here's the thing we want, and let's grab the ID and put that in. Or I could just hard code it as part of the demo. I took the latter, obviously. But we're going to post a work order. We're going to create a work order in the Dynamics system. And remember, our managed services, they took a phone call, something's landed in a database and it's coming through. So Dynamics, turns out, it's got some APIs behind it, right? For those of you that are familiar with them, you either love them or there's tiers. So I'm just going to go to where Dynamics is. There we go. So this is my Dynamics service, okay? It's Mick Badron Ignite, CRM, Dynamics.com. It's legit, it's the real thing. Or as my kids say, it's lit. That's legit. Anyway. I feel like I'm talking to texting world at home sometimes. So this is Dynamics. Now, Dynamics has a URL and it's got a whole API behind it. So speaking to a Dynamics developer, they'd say, well, let's just build a .NET app or a Node app or whatever it might be. I'm going to go and talk to the SDK, and you won't see them for a week. Right? They're getting the authentication bit right. So off that, I then just added work orders. So in terms of work orders, I can see the data there and I can see some of the IDs. So we can go to these entities in CRM and go through customizations and see the values of the relationships that they have. So essentially it's kind of a little bit of this. This is the easiest way I find to get some of the IDs that you need out of this. So that's where we get it from. And there's a whole OData query language behind this that we can use as well if the connectors don't give you what you need. All right. Time to run it. Always a good sign. Let's give it a go. And let's go and run. So who's had to play around with logic apps? Beautiful. About 2 of us. Sensational. All right. So that was my JSON that didn't quite work. Property required. Oh, and I think I know why, but it's changed. So this is a joy, so it changes overnight. But it was working this morning. So the part, just to let you know, the technical people, which is all of us, that table 1 should be result set. Shouldn't be table 1. Table 1 is just new today, right here, right now for the demo. So they've just been, okay. Fortunately, I have gone and done this ahead of time. So look, I can go back and change the schema and update this, but look, later on down the track I'll do that. Okay. So all right, there we go. So here's our work orders of 50,001 and 50,002. So they're the ones that we're interested in. They came through on my run through this morning when no one was looking. Right? A friend of mine said to me, the success of a demo is inversely proportional to the amount of people watching it. Right. So I'm in Dynamics at the moment, and an application. Now the part that is important for us, just down the bottom, and I've kind of extended this a bit. I haven't done too much to this world because I wanted to show you it looking pretty raw, rough and ready, rather than my CRM doesn't look anything like this. And just the bits down the bottom there are the work order summary, the follow-up note, and the booking summary. So there's a fixed dryer in there which came from our database, from our system. Actually, let me. Oh yeah, that's gonna cause me grief. I bet it is. Let's do it anyway. Where's my Logic Apps? That's the Ignite. There you go. Okay. So let's just go. Yep, rightio. It's gonna. Yeah, right. Leave it. I was going to take that out, but leave that with me. All right. So basically, we've got with a push, we've got our data in Dynamics, right? There's the order number 50,001, 50,002. They're our two that we want to deal with, and it's in Dynamics, which is fantastic, right? That's sort of where we wanted to. I sort of made a stretch at that last little bit, but just use your imagination, right? It's magic. And yeah, all right. So back to the chase. So we've got it running. I've got logs around that. I've got diagnostics around it. A couple of things just to keep an eye out for Logic Apps. It's a great surface. That's sort of the abstraction level that we need, right? We drag and drop these things in, have a play around. You can, query them and all the rest of it. So the next bit is that, the next bit is, well, what version of Logic Apps are we running? Because when you get things in production, you go, it works, right? And then you sort of go, did it work this week? Yes, great. So what we'd like to see surfaced is, well, what version of Logic Apps, the engine, do we have in our region? And what version of the connectors do we have in our region? Because when you're dealing with integration, it's a connection of all many moving parts, right? So it's like the glue in between, and the integration, the glue is the one that gets the blame, even though the target system may have changed or might have been off air for 2 days. Okay, so in terms of the modern apps development, right? So we've got our stuff in an application. Doesn't have to be cloud-based necessarily, but it is in this case. So how can we best approach our application development? And in terms of Power Apps, there's some numbers here that are saying, well, 102,000 plus creators, 42,000 organizations with a Z, and over 137 countries, right? So, when you're building apps, there's always two sides of two warring parties, right? And you're trying to keep everyone happy. So you've got this element of, security, scalability, managed, integrated, compliant. Developers in the room and IT folks, not a problem. That's I don't understand what you're talking about. That's it, right? Whereas, on the other side, we want to have something that looks good, that works, and so on. So in terms of Power Apps, it's a great design surface, great sort of, development walkthrough and experience. Is it going to give you a Candy Crush? No. Right? So there are sort of applications where, situations where it's not going to be relevant or it's not going to be the right tool for the job. So what Microsoft have done today is to center it around the enterprise. So center it around your organization and say, well, you need an organizational login to be able to use this Power App. So that's just where they're at the moment. It's taken a few different forms along the way to get to here, but essentially we're going to provide a rapid, modern, mobile application development environment for your employees, where typically developers don't need to do it for power users. So that's kind of where they're picturing for that. And oh, really? I just put that in there. So, just see whether you're awake. No, actually, for those of you that were scratching your heads, this is not a Windows 10 blue screen of death. And beep.sys, you're like, oh, yeah, Mick, I know this one. All right. I did that once to a friend of mine who was presenting up on stage at TechEd for the first time, but that's another story. All right. So in terms of our Power Apps and things like this, so this is sort of Microsoft's thinking going forward, and expect this to really expand out over the next year or so, year and a half. They're making significant investments into all of this, and the key is Logic Apps is that world where we can run those. They don't need to be enterprise users. They could be part of the real foundational plumbing of your organization and your system. Wrapped up in API management, beautiful, it's a match made in heaven. Over in this sort of world, we want to be able to, how do we get applications out the door faster? Field engineers running around, they're part of our organisation, they're us, they're running around with mobile devices. How can we tackle that market? And so, things like Power BI, Power Apps, and Flow. Flow is a high-level abstraction of Logic Apps designed for power users. So they can drag and drop, and maybe it's a document approval, maybe it's an email, maybe there's some sort of mini flow that's mini process that's there. It runs on Logic Apps. The code behind Flow is the same as what you see in the in the Logic Apps code view. So the key behind this is, and this is just a side note too, is that over the years of integration, one of the things that we did early on in the piece was someone said to you, I want you to integrate A to B. You'd go, oh, okay, I'm going to do that, but chances are you're going to ask me to integrate A to B to C, and maybe in JSON, or maybe in XML, and maybe bitwise and bytewise, and so you'd end up building a library or a module that reuse was, you get more reuse over time, and so you'd end up building Goliath, right, for this one little thing that was meant to take 3 days, and hopefully you got reuse over it. My experience, 3 times or more meant reuse, but it was very far and few in between. So we end up over-investing in a lot of these plumbing, a lot of these integration connectors and so forth to handle these wide range of different situations, just because it was difficult to build this stuff out. Whereas what we're finding in Flow and Logic Apps and so forth, because they're so quick to build, they're purpose-built. What do you need? I need to take this table and throw it into Twitter, for example, or take some Twitter feeds and do something else with, or Twilio, or whatever. It's very purpose-built for what you need it to do. Someone says, well, that's great for manufacturing, but can you do it for sales as well? No problems. Let's go and build exactly the same for sales, but different endpoints and so on. And it's a real sort of mindset shift. Right? You're not building the library to solve everything. You're building just exactly what the business needs at that point in time. So, as far as the business application platform is concerned, it's then underpinned by some solid, solid features and functions. Azure Functions is something that has been spoken about a fair bit. Have a look at those. They're very interesting. It's a technology built on top of web jobs. It's serverless, right? So a lot of this stuff, we're getting to tinless type deployments and solutions. And one half of my company scratches their head and says, there's got to be a server. And you go, well, look, magic. There is none. It runs. No, how's it pay? And I just leave them and come back to them after lunch, and they're still, in this in this state, right? Serverless, magic, and so look, it's where it's going. I don't want to have to look after tin. You guys as software developers, you've got your ideas in your head, you've got your creativity, you've got the ability to do it. Don't be tied back by looking after, the third child, which is, I've got to go to the server, make sure it's running, disk space, patched, if you're allowed near the server these days. And so some interesting concepts coming out and interesting things, which is like a common data model. So in my Power Apps, for those of you that have used master data services in SQL, it's very similar. So that as my mobile platform or as my flows are evolving and working off data, rather than fetching work orders, for example, to come into the system from an on-premise SQL database, they're pushed into a common data model and then can be used and shared across a variety of different solutions. So it actually ties into, under the covers, it ties into Dynamics in there. So look, really, some really interesting thought around this, because if I'm building a second mobile app, I can just go to my common data model and go, there's all my work orders. I don't have to sort of scratch my head and wonder where they came from and what security and keys and values and so on. It's there as part of the common data model. And obviously that can be reported upon and reported off and integrated in with and so on as well. So think of SQL Master Data Services, cloud-based. All right, so in terms of our Power Apps, we'd like to connect to data, create some forms, and then use it. That's essentially the whole go. Some very nice animations. We're about to see that happen in a tick. Some connectors, lots of different connectors. You guys would have noticed Microsoft in the last 3-4 years, very open source, a lot better playing with other players in the community. It's phenomenal. It's great to see. So, things like Slack and the rest of it, they're all there. We can connect off. So really, the power of this environment is the connectors, right? We can go off Trello and various other things as well. And then publish. We can also do things like, capture signatures and so on. So this environment is evolving as well, so the Power Apps environment. And this was just a little slide on the common data model and how it's used, and there's an API, security over the top, real-time sync if you want. So there's some very nice services in this thing to keep it up to date and keep it humming. And obviously we can go off and talk to these custom APIs, which is great. So let's switch over and I'll see how. I'm here. Yep, okay. So we've got that. So not you. So if I'm to go over to my Power Apps, powerapps.com, and I've enabled it as part of my Office 365 tenant. And there's a few different ways that you can enable this. You can get it you don't have to have an Office 365 tenant, it just can be part of your Azure AD, and it's an add-on as part of your Azure subscriptions and so on. And okay. So in terms of creating a new application, I can go down here and create a new app and create it through the web or on Windows. So I've already taken the liberty to download the Power Apps Trusted Windows Store app. And have I opened him up? Of course I haven't opened him up. So for those of you that recognize icons, there's two Visual Studio icons that I just itch every time I move the mouse over. I've got to click on that, and I'm not, right? I've got to resist it. So I'm just going to launch Power Apps. So here's a designer. Here's Windows 10 designer that I have. And I've got some sample applications in like 6-point writing for you guys, so just sorry about that. And I can go and create a new app. Now, along the top here, I've got some of my connectors that I already have in place. So it knows about the Logic apps and Power Apps kind of talk together about this, right? The yin and yang, or the the key master and the Ghostbuster or whoever it was. Gatekeeper, that's it, in Ghostbusters. But so there's my Dynamics 365 connection up here. And so what I'm going to do is just click Phone Layout, and I'm going to select the right content source, as it's called in this space. So I've got the right one. The one above was two weeks of grief, right? Apparently there was something to do with the underlying discovery service in authentication. And the guys, the team helped me out quite a lot, and they provisioned the second one for me, the tenant. They said, Mick, for your Ignite demo, keep going with this one. I said, fantastic, great. All right, so for those of you who are keen CRM ninja eyes, these are all the entities in CRM, and the one that I'd like to get down to is work orders. You reckon? There we go. Work orders down the bottom. I'm going to connect. Getting things ready. It's pretty chatty, right? It's pretty cool. Sort of, power user style. This is great. So, in the background, we should have a bit of this music. Right. Look at this. Thank you, Mr. Music. But we're there, right? It's created something for me. I don't know what it is, but I'm off getting a coffee because I want to talk to my neighbour at work. And I've got something happening. I'm sort of just I'm buying time here because I need to see some data come up. Don't worry, it's the wrong data, but we'll get there. And then I've got 3 screens over on the right-hand side, small as they come, but I'm close, right? I've moved into Power User Developer. So as a developer, or as a power user building these things out, I kind of always feel the need to right-click and view source. But all right, so I've got this design surface. I've got this VB style design surface thing, and on the right-hand side, I've got some fields that I can pick out of a work order. So I've got a pretty rich environment. So I'm just going to tailor a couple of things here. And this is almost, I have to do things make things tough for myself sometimes. Work order name I want. Of course you're going to find it, Mick, when people are watching. Really? This one I didn't plan, by the way. It's not my blue screen of death. Oh, that one's not going to be it. Let me just. So, user voice would be great to search fields. Oh man. Fallen over at the first hurdle. Oh, there we go. Beautiful. Okay, lovely. So, and I'll do that to there. Look at this. I'll make him blue because blue's the new U. There we go. I've got some other fields over there. I'm just going to drag this one up to here as well. Okay, let me just grab that one, select this, and work order summary. Work order type, close. Booking summary, close. Work order summary. Okay, so I've got work order summary, and I've got the feedback. Let's have a quick look. Follow-up note, there we go. Okay, great. So let's have a look at that. Looks awesome, right? Sort of, not really. we've got pool pump needs fixing. So it kind of gives us some things, and we sort of see that in CRM, and it's now over here, but this concat business, whatever, doesn't really make sense and doesn't look good either. Time to own up. That was me playing around and doing something wrong earlier. So what I did in CRM was go and deactivate the account. So it's basically been deactivated. So what I need to do is to just come down here and take out, I've got a run sheet here. It's the most organised I've been for a long while. So over on the right is where the items, where does it get these gallery items with the data from? And it fetches around about 500 at a time down the platform. So yes, Power Apps is a little bit chatty, or is chatty. We can store data local through the use of things like collections. And so what I'm going to do is just get that, change that, just make sure that the A didn't come out. It did. There we go. I'll make this guy smaller. So it's off basically refreshing that data. That's what I tell myself. And I'd also like to, if this box gets bigger, scroll. There we go. Oh, you know what I've done? I changed that field. Awesome. Mick. Yeah, let's not worry about that for the moment. You got the picture. You did see that number come up there before, 5001. Can we, I'll switch to an app that I've got built anyway. But the part that, so this is working, and the part that I did want to sort of show you here is that on this screen, when we go into a detail screen, I'll just bring this guy up. When we go into a detail screen, it's actually showing a lot of the things that I don't want it to show, like agreement type. So what I'm going to do is click on the eye and hide it. So I'm going to hide the price list. Doesn't make sense to show it here. Work order type. So I've got my number. I've got system status. I've got something that's taxable possibly. Now I can also come down here and add items onto this, which is pretty cool. I can go to my media, I can add images, I could add a barcode reader if I want, so that's a recent addition. Over on my text, I can add signature capture, so on as well. So it's pretty phenomenal what we can do. And I'm going to add an image in this space, and I'm just going to go back to my magic script of goodies and just take this bit and come up with, where are you, data? There we go. So just do that and get rid of the A at the front, which trap for young players. There we go. And I've now got an image of, I'm using the Bing APIs there, and I've now got an image of the location of where this work order is. So I'm not going to go through all the fields and populate and everything else, but you can start to see that could be a camera where I can take a photo of the dryer or the pool pump, read a barcode, go off and get details about what that thing is, where it was installed, who did it, what the spare parts are, safety things, and so on. And so the beauty behind this now is that we've got an app. I'll just call it Ignite on the Fly. And I'll give it a red so we can see it. It's a star. Let's save it. So I've now saved it. And where do I want to save it? In the cloud. And I can then go and share it with the rest of my team, share it with my organisation. And I've got a couple of other apps in there as well. Always good to be prepared as a Boy Scout. And we can go and run them. So in this, up over here in the designer, I've got a preview. I can preview that straight away and see what it looks like. So to see if this is going to work, okay, so this is my phone. And here is Power Apps, the app that gets installed. So same on iOS, this is an Android device. I've got my apps, there's an Ignite demo you can see there. And there's also the one that I did earlier. So basically that's the publishing process. If I need to make a change, I go back up, make a change, save, publish, and my new list gets created. So yes, I do need to be connected at this point in time to the network. I can't be in a mine, down 20 floors down, right? So the first time you run it, it'll go and say, it'll download the app, and then coming up with my work orders. It's searchable at the top, and similar, 5002, 5001, it's ordered. So I can go into here. This is running on my phone. There's the address, that's similar to what we looked at. I then can select edit, we're editing that number, welcome Ignite. I'll make a change, or I won't. No, there's a keyboard that, let me do it on my phone then, or not. Oh, there we go. That's good for me. So I've made a change, and that's then going to be reflected. Didn't display it here, which was very short-sighted of me, but you can see it in there. And where are we? Come back to our, wrong window, Mick. Come back to our CRM. Go to our 5002 work order. And you can see there, look at that. That's us, right? That is us right there. Not 10 minutes in the oven and prepared earlier. So look, that's it. That's it. So look, pretty phenomenal. So that's, is it production ready? No, possibly not, right? But pretty quick, another couple of hours. There's something to prototype, something to demo. Field engineers can go around a car park, take photos of cars, number plates, image recognition, send it up to cognitive services. You're on your way, right? So no waiting 5 or 6 weeks in the App Store to have our first trial run, or even through Hockey app and the like. So look, that was pretty good, I thought. So in terms of where Power Apps is going and what's coming, the designer and those sorts of things are going to be enhanced. Reusable forms and the like, being able to reuse a lot of the bits that you do in each app for between them and so forth, as well as some of these amazing some of the other features. So this is a really hot space at the moment in terms of the feature set and what's being around. So we've got push support for Android and so on. So some pretty significant complex services that are in there. So definitely being able to keep an eye on it. Not saying it's the answer to absolutely everything, but certainly have a good look at it, in terms of your next development cycle. OData, there's a whole bunch of data sync coming out, SharePoint Online, those sorts of things as well. So lots of good stuff. So in terms of wrapping up, hopefully you saw the why. You got the why in the digital transformation space. Why are we doing this? Why do we care? As techos go, we love the technology, right? Show us something new, something great. Someone's going to ask you somewhere, so how can we use it, right? How can we make money from it? How's it going to help us? And that's the answer we need to have. And so we saw a work order demo. Go away to Dynamics 365. And my last 3 points there, work smarter, right? It's not taking anything away from what you do, not taking away from the beautiful Visual Studio experience and getting in there. And there's times where I don't feel like I've worked a good day unless I've written 1,000 lines of code, right? But you're now you're freed up more so that your 1,000 lines of code that you are going to write is going to be more focused and more targeted onto absolutely the game-changing stuff that you want to be able to do. So in terms of looking at learning and finding out more about these things, then obviously Channel 9 is where there's a lot of stuff. So we covered Logic Apps, we covered a little bit on Dynamics, connectors, and also Power Apps and connecting that through. The content sources just show up, and there's so much more in that environment that you can do, but I've only got a limited time. And by all means, please fill out your evals. Give your honest opinion back, because if you don't fill out your eval, they take it as a negative. I go, well, why is the glass half empty? Why isn't it half full? But look, and I'm Mick Badger, and I'll be around the speaker lounge. I hope you enjoyed the blue screen of death slide.